From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. Our top story tonight is about an indictment for tax fraud. The Trump Organization's chief financial officer, Allen Weisselberg, surrendered to police this morning. The Manhattan District Attorney Office charged the longtime CFO. Weisselberg is facing criminal charges after allegedly paying employees off the books to avoid taxes. He and other Trump Organization executives allegedly received benefits without reporting them properly on their tax returns. These included payments for cars, apartments, and private school tuition. Weisselberg ran the Trump Organization while the former president was in the White House. Trump has denied any wrongdoing. The Supreme Court on Thursday ruled 6-3 along partisan lines to uphold Arizona's voting rules supported by Republicans. Democrats allege that they unlawfully discriminate against the state's Native American, Hispanic, and Black voters. The case concerned two Arizona voting rules that a federal appeals court found to be in violation of the Voting Rights Act. One of the measures is known as out-of-precinct policy. This disqualifies ballots cast in the wrong precinct on Election Day. The other measure is known as the ballot collection law. This rule forbids most people except for family members to collect and deliver ballots to the polls. Republicans often refer to third-party ballot collection as ballot harvesting. Justice Samuel Alito, reflecting the majority court opinion, said that neither rule violates the civil rights law. 17 states have enacted 28 new laws making it harder to vote. In another decision, the Supreme Court invalidated a California rule that requires charitable organizations to disclose the names of contributors. It could impact the future of dark money politics. The opinion was 6-3 along conservative liberal lines. President Biden says he's deeply disappointed in today's decision by the United States Supreme Court that undercuts the Voting Rights Act. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has appointed Representative Liz Cheney to the new Select Committee to investigate the attacks on the U.S. Capitol. The United States House of Representatives voted Wednesday to create a Select Committee to investigate the January 6th insurrection. Lawmakers voted largely along party lines. All but two Republicans voted against forming the committee. Liz Cheney of Wyoming and Adam Kinzinger of Illinois joined all Democratic representatives to back the initiative. The House decided to establish the committee after an effort to set up an independent, bipartisan commission failed last month. That was blocked by Senate Republicans. Only 35 House Republicans and 7 GOP senators had supported the commission. The rest of the Republican Party argued that it was unnecessary. Dozens of immigrants, faith leaders, and immigration advocates have broken a 3-week-long fast in Washington, D.C. They were fasting together to raise awareness about the status of undocumented people in the United States. Over 160 people nationwide participated in the Fast for Freedom initiative. They're advocating for immigration reform to be incorporated into upcoming job and infrastructure package, and as well as budget reconciliation bills. Let's hear from Nancy Palacios, a 32-year-old activist from Florida.
As a DACA recipient who's been in this country since the age of 6, I was undocumented until 23 when DACA happened. As a victory of the community, I have undocumented parents. Both my mom and my father have been here since 1995, awaiting a pathway to citizenship. So me coming to DC and joining this fast was not just about myself, it was about people like my mom and my dad.
In international news today, we begin with Canada. Canada's Independence Day today is being marked with mixed feelings. Heading calls from Indigenous people, some places have canceled plans to mark the holiday. This was after hundreds of graves of children in residential schools across the country were discovered after the last few weeks. Residential schools were first established by Canada's European settlers in the 1800s. Indigenous children were taken away from families, assimilated by force into the settlers' religion and culture in these schools. The last one closed in the late 1990s. More than 150,000 indigenous children faced abuse in these residential schools. Thousands of children died of disease, neglect, and other causes. Since the discovery of the graves, 4 small Catholic churches on indigenous land in rural southern British Columbia have been destroyed by suspicious fires. There has also been a fire near another site where 751 unmarked graves were flagged in Saskatchewan, as well as one outside Edmonton in Alberta. Germany and Italy have completed their withdrawal of soldiers from Afghanistan. This ends a 20-year-old deployment by both countries. Members of the US-backed alliance NATO agreed in April to wrap up its mission in Afghanistan. Here are Afghan government forces taking over military bases after the withdrawal of Italian troops. The last of German soldiers also departed. About 150,000 German soldiers were part of Afghanistan's occupation since 2001. It was the largest military force in the country, second only to the United States. 59 German soldiers died in Afghanistan. The last of the troops were airlifted out of their base in Mazar-e-Sharif in northern Afghanistan. Meanwhile, the security situation in Afghanistan has been changing quickly for several weeks since the Taliban advanced. Washington has already announced it is preparing for the evacuation of its Afghan translators. They face possible retaliation from the Taliban. The US-led NATO war and occupation of Afghanistan began on October 7, 2001. This was less than a month after the 9/11 attacks. In related news, Donald Rumsfeld died at the age of 88 on Wednesday. He's the former US Defense Secretary who led the wars against Iraq and Afghanistan. He also approved illegal interrogation methods that led to the torture of detainees in both countries. Donald Rumsfeld may be dead, but the wars he started and the devastation he caused still live on. More details in a report by Ali Khalaf and Saliha Farouk.
Donald Rumsfeld has passed away at the age of 88. He served as the White House Chief of Staff during the Ford administration. He then served 3 stints as Secretary of Defense. He was the Pentagon's chief when on September 11, 2001, it was attacked. He led the Iraq and Afghanistan invasions. CNN says it was Rumsfeld to push George W. Bush to target Iraq after 9/11, although Al-Qaeda was in Afghanistan, not Iraq. The Lancet estimated about 1 million people died as a result in Iraq. The Lancet is one of the oldest scientific medical journals in the world. Rumsfeld had predicted that the war will be short, but just this week, the US was still bombing the region. Here is Rumsfeld in 2002, saying that they are sure about chemical weapons in Iraq.
They have them and they continue to develop them, and they've weaponized chemical weapons. We know that. They've had an active program to develop nuclear weapons. It's also clear that they are actively developing biological weapons.
Post-invasion America found no such weapons. Many critics held him responsible for the torture of detainees. Images of Abu Ghraib prison circulated around the world, drowning America's image. Here is the torture memo signed by him, authorizing 20-hour interrogations, removal of clothing, the use of phobias, and stress positions for up to 4 hours. Rumsfeld launched a parallel intelligence collection mechanism in the Pentagon. This came after the U.S. intelligence community failed to come up with reporting that confirmed his beliefs about chemical weapons in Iraq. America and NATO are leaving Afghanistan now, leaving a legacy of devastation behind. The Taliban have declared victory, while millions of Afghans are left with uncertain futures.
Germany's plan to launch a state-backed training center for imams is being criticized by leading Muslim groups. The Daily Sabah reports that Muslims believe it conflicts with the principle that religious communities alone are entitled to train their leaders. German Muslims also already have their own imam training programs. According to German broadcaster Deutsche Welle, the first term of the government-supported Islamic college program will provide a 2-year education. There are currently 20 male and female candidates enrolled. There are 5 million Muslims in Germany. The country hosts the second largest Muslim population in Western Europe after France. Germany has experienced a rise in racism and anti-Muslim hatred in recent years. This has been fueled by hateful rhetoric and propaganda from neo-Nazi groups and the far-right opposition Alternative for the Germany Party. There are approximately 800,000 Syrian refugees in Germany. They arrived in 2015 via the Balkan route. At that time, Germany's Chancellor Angela Merkel welcomed refugees while other European states closed their borders to them. Algerian Finance Minister Ayman bin Abdurrahman has been named Prime Minister. He replaces Abdelaziz Gerad, who had held the position since late 2019. Gerad resigned last week following the early parliamentarian elections held on June 12. His government had been unable to redress the country's economic crisis. Africa's fourth largest economy is heavily dependent on oil revenue. These have slumped in the face of global economic slowdown. Algeria's main Islamic party announced that it would not participate in the new government. The movement of the Society of Peace was not satisfied with its negotiations. It came third in the vote with 65 seats in the 407-seat legislature. The party had been a part of successive Algerian governments from 1996 to 2011. Seasonal flooding of the Ganga River is exposing hundreds of bodies from shallow graves. They were buried by the river during India's recent COVID-19 surge. Neeraj Kumar Singh, an official in the northern city of Allahabad, said that there were between 500 to 600 bodies buried next to the city. Most are believed to have died from coronavirus in April and May. That was when India was hit by a spike in infections that overwhelmed hospitals in many areas. Some families were unable to afford firewood for traditional Hindu cremation. This is why the bodies were immersed in the Ganga or buried in sandbags next to the river. The number of such graves has stoked suspicion that India's total deaths from the pandemic may be over 1 million. This is several times the Indian government's official estimate. COVID's Delta variant from India continues to surge in more countries, leading to more lockdowns. Following Australia, South Africa, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Malaysia are now being locked down. Indonesia's President Joko Widodo announced emergency restrictions to battle the surge of the virus. The Delta virus infections surged to a record level, topping 21,000 per day in Southeast Asia's worst-hit nation. The figure brings the country's pandemic tally to more than 2.1 million coronavirus cases, with over 57,000 deaths. President Widodo said the new measures would be imposed for more than 2 weeks in the capital Jakarta and across hard-hit Java. They would also apply to the island of Bali, which is a popular tourist haven. The streets of Kuala Lumpur were also deserted, and Malaysia's virus lockdown was extended. The lockdown was supposed to have ended nearly a month after it started in early June. This is what some Malaysians had to say about the extension.
Actually, it's very bad for business, but otherwise, it's better to what they call to break the chain of the COVID-19. Actually, around 20 to 25% drop down, but I still have my maintain with my regular customers. So there's regular customers. They are coming from all the way from Shah Alam and places far away.
China has made history by filming the first footage ever of a rover driving on Mars that any nation has produced. Like NASA, which landed its fifth Martian rover in February, China's Zhurong rover touched down on the red planet this year. It brought to Mars instruments like a weather station, ground-penetrating radar, and a device for blasting rocks apart to measure their mineral content. China has also brought a deployable Wi-Fi camera, which it left in the dust before driving off. This was to create footage of the rover driving down from the landing module and doing a series of maneuvers. This was the first such footage in human history. Audio clips of its metal wheels scraping against the embarking ramps was also collected. Earlier this year, NASA's Perseverance collected video of its Ingenuity Martian helicopter. It showed the rover performing a flight test as well as a dramatic parachute deployment and landing. This was dubbed 7 Minutes of Terror. China also collected its own video of the parachute deployment and landing. China's solar-powered Zhurong rover has traveled 236 meters since it landed on June 15. It continues to perform system checks before heading off in search of data. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
Welcome back. A major witness in the United States Department of Justice case against Julian Assange has admitted to fabricating key accusations in the indictment against the WikiLeaks founder. To discuss this development, let's go to Saliha Farouk, who's with journalist Kevin Gosztola. Over to you, Saliha.
Much appreciated. Today we're here with Kevin Gosztola, who is a journalist as well as a managing editor of Shatterproof. Kevin, thank you so much for your time today.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. Now, if you can please talk to us about this latest revelation coming from a key Icelandic witness, being Siggi Þórðarson, admitting that his testimony against Assange was untruthful. What does this mean for Julian Assange and the US's ongoing case against him?
Well, what it means is that we have more evidence of the corruption that is ongoing in this case. This is an informant for the FBI who, in a superseding indictment back in July 2020, added allegations against Julian Assange, which the defense for Julian Assange did not have adequate amount of time to deal with before they had his extradition trial in September. And those allegations were an attempt to, as his lawyers might describe it, hackify the indictment. The goal of the Justice Department is to create this image and perpetuate this image of Julian Assange as someone who is not a journalist. And so, as one of their key allegations around a computer crime was falling apart, a crime that he's alleged to have committed with Chelsea Manning back in 2010, they decided they were going to add in other examples of conduct when he worked as a WikiLeaks editor-in-chief, and they were accusing him of trying to hack into computer systems that are part of the Icelandic government. The only problem is, as we learned from this bombshell report, from the witness himself, from the informant himself, these are all fabrications, if not plain lies. And Ziggy Thordarson is very clear in explaining this to the journalist with Stunden, the outlet that reported on this. And what it shows is that basically these allegations that played a part in helping the judge come to the conclusion that he is not a journalist, although the extradition request was denied, it played a role in ensuring that the grounds for rejecting the extradition request were not in protecting press freedom, but they were just basically, we can't trust the U.S. to take care of you without you committing suicide in a U.S. prison.
Now, Kevin, Icelandic officials are revealing that the U.S. is deceiving certain individuals in Iceland to help make a greater case against Assange. And after years of similar holes in the story, including Thordarson's questionable reputation while he worked with the FBI, as you mentioned just now, is there any longer a factual basis for this case being held against Julian Assange?
I do not believe that there is an allegation within this indictment that fully constitute a crime. What they were trying to say is that he had violated government computer systems. What they have not proven is that there's any evidence that he's engaged in this. But what they have shown, the evidence that they claim to be a crucial part of their case, is that he was in communication allegedly with Chelsea Manning, the Army intelligence analyst who was prosecuted for the disclosures to WikiLeaks. They allege that he communicated with her, talked to her about the documents in which she had access, and then those documents, he solicited them. He asked her to provide those documents to WikiLeaks. Those documents were the Iraq war logs and Afghanistan war logs. They were the U.S. diplomatic cables and files on Guantanamo Bay prisoners. And so the U.S. government has taken the step of targeting Julian Assange, particularly because of his role in obtaining that material. But what is described is no more and no less than what journalists do on a daily basis with their sources in order to do journalism. The kind of journalism we need to know what our governments are doing when they pursue wars and when they engage in diplomacy that is high stakes and has an impact on all of our lives.
Thank you so much for that insight. Now, if you could please talk to us about the implications of public perception of Assange at this time. So, for example, does the US media and public discourse think that the charges against Assange have to do with helping expose US war crimes, or does it have to do a little bit more with Russiagate in their view? And has the US government lost sight of what it's fighting at this time?
Yeah, so I would say that there are a fair number of journalists within the U.S. media, or even people who have taken spots in the public sphere as commentators, who are extraordinarily focused on what they believe happened with WikiLeaks when it comes to the publication of campaign emails from Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign in her run against Donald Trump back in 2016. But this has no part to play at all in the indictments against Julian Assange. The Justice Department has yet to issue a single charge against Julian Assange related to any alleged activity with these emails. If anything, our own court system has upheld the publication of the hacked materials as protected under the First Amendment. I'd refer your viewers to Judge John Kodal in the Southern District of New York, who issued a decision when the Democratic National Committee sued WikiLeaks as well as the Trump Organization and the alleged people connected to Russia. And the judge basically defended WikiLeaks and Julian Assange and said they had a right to publish under the First Amendment. And so they've been focused on this. But by and large, the good thing, aside from those individuals, that faction of people, is that several media organizations, their editorial boards, press freedom organizations have all united, and this isn't just in the United States, but it is worldwide, to say that there is going to be a huge damage, a huge amount of damage done to freedom of the press in the United States and around the world if this case is allowed to go forward. So that's why you see a united front demanding that Joe Biden and his administration dismiss these charges against Julian Assange right now.
Now, getting into the Joe Biden administration, the previous Trump administration was originally appealing a decision to drop the case against Assange, as you mentioned, this idea of indictments. Will this latest discovery about the key witnesses' inaccurate testimony perhaps contribute to dropping the appeal brought against Assange and putting an end to this case? I just wanted to get your professional opinion on that.
I do not think that it will have much bearing, simply because the corruption in this case has not stopped the Justice Department from pursuing it before. We have allegations around the FBI seizing legally privileged materials from the embassy that belonged to Julian Assange, handing them over to the U.S. government. We also have allegations about a private security company, a Spanish private security company named UC Global, that is implicated in spying on Assange and his illegal team and everyone who visited him, including journalists and doctors. And so those allegations have not led any judge at any stage to say that this needs to be brought to a halt and the extradition cannot go forward. And I also will say that the allegations in which Ziggy Thordarson is responsible for form a very, very small part of the window dressing that the Justice Department is trying to do. And they aren't really linked to any specific charge against Julian Assange. So all this bombshell report really does for Assange and his legal team is add more evidence to the public perception that should exist. Not the one that the establishment media creates, but the one that journalists like myself and others who are doing diligent work are trying to show, which is that there is an extremely large amount of corruption when it comes to this case in how they have pursued Julian Assange and ensured that he remains in jail since April 2019, when he was expelled from the British embassy, and expelled because they would not recognize that he had a right to asylum within that embassy, and they believed that he was a fugitive fleeing from justice instead of a journalist who was facing persecution from the U.S. government.
A critical conversation on this trending story with Kevin Gosztola, who is a journalist as well as the managing editor of Shatterproof. Kevin, thank you again for your time with us today.
Thank you so much, and thanks for being understanding. I know there's some background noise.
It's no problem at all. Back to Hena Zuberi in the news studio.
Thank you, Salaha. Before moving on to our next analysis, let's take a quick break. We'll be right back after these messages.
Our fellow Americans.
Right now, the COVID-19 vaccines are available to millions of Americans.
And soon, they will be available to everyone.
The science is clear. These vaccines will protect you and those you love from this dangerous and deadly disease.
They could save your life.
So we urge you to get vaccinated when it's available to you.
That's the first step to ending the pandemic and moving our country forward. It's up to you.
They took over my bedroom. Come on, come on. Okay, Dad. 1, 2, 3. Dad! You saved me. Dad?
Are you okay?
I'm fine, dear.
Your hero needs you now, and AARP is here to help. Find the care guides you need at aarp.org/caregiving.
Welcome back. The internet has made life a lot easier for business owners, but it's also made it easy for businesses to get hacked. Cyber attacks on big companies dominate the news, but small business owners are big targets too. Cybersecurity expert Glenn Allacks Crowther is joining Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid for a detailed conversation on how to protect yourself from cyber attacks. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hannah. Cybersecurity has become a major concern now, not just between countries, Russia and the United States and the rest, but also for the businesses. Small businesses, many times the cyber attacks news does not become a news. To discuss all of that and what we can do about it is an expert who's a cyber security expert, Alexander Crowther. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Professor Crowther is a professor at the Florida International University. So what are the biggest cybersecurity threats right now?
Well, we're seeing cyber crime climbing exponentially. And so if you have information, it doesn't matter who you are. If you have something that is monetizable, that they can make into money, or money itself, they are going to come after you. And so we are all at risk. You get emails, you get text messages every day that claim to be from somebody legitimate that are not. And when you click on the link, they will be into your systems, and then they will either steal your money and or your information, and no one is really safe.
So what are the different types of cyber attacks?
Well, so the major denial type attack is called denial of service, and that's where they just shut you down by overwhelming your system. Picture somebody calling your phone every couple of seconds, except multiple times, multiple sources calling your phone gets overwhelmed. It's the same type of thing. That's for denial. The main one we're talking about here is taking information or money. And so what they'll do there is they will break into your system, and if they're stealing money, they will pretend to be you. They will steal your authentication data and then move the money to them. Or if they're looking for information, they will break in, they will look around, and they will download the information. But the main point is how all these start. Over 90% of successful cyber operations start with phishing. You know, that message that you get that says, this is your bank, we have important information for you, click on this link. And those are all false. They're phishing attacks.
So it is called phishing, like a...
Yes. So phishing with PH, phishing.
With PH, but sounds like the first phishing as well.
And it's that's where the name comes from, right? Is they're phishing for your information, they're phishing for data, and so that's how they get in. So actually, to resolve this issue, we just need to practice cyber hygiene. And the first rule of cyber hygiene is do not click on the link. Do not trust any message that comes from anybody, and even if it comes from allegedly a friend, I suggest that you contact that friend and make sure that they have sent the message. Don't trust any message that you get via an electronic means.
Especially if it is probably some business or financial transaction or any type of link.
Any type of link. They're very good at putting these messages together. Sometimes it will be allegedly from your grandmother who says that she needs money. Sometimes it will allegedly be from your bank. Sometimes we get phone calls about the warranty on your automobile, things like that, and they disguise them as many different things. There is no limit to the ingenuity of the human mind, and cyber criminals are proving this every day.
So what is ransomware?
So ransomware is where they will go in and they will change your password on your computer or on your files so that you may no longer access those files. And then you have to pay them money in order for them to either change the password back or give you the new password.
So Professor Crowther, you mentioned cyber hygiene. How come cyber hygiene is not as well known nowadays as the other hygiene which we're trying to save ourselves from the COVID-19?
Well, that's a great question, because we really should have a systematic societal approach to cyber hygiene, starting with children and older people, the third age, because both of them are accessing platforms, phones, tablets, things like that every day, but they don't have this type of training. In high school, you should have cyber hygiene and the appropriate use of information and information technology. And then as you go on from high school, you should be getting information on how to use information technology and information appropriately in the workspace. But we don't have any system like that, certainly in the United States.
Are there any schools who are teaching children about it?
Yes, absolutely. The Florida International University has a partnership with several schools in South Florida where we are exporting that. So even though we're a university, we teach elementary school children that in the area. We have special programs for high school children. Every university should teach cyber hygiene. Every high school should teach cyber hygiene. And then as you go along in a profession, our professional schools, like our business school, has cyber for business. Our medical school has cyber for medical. I'm involved in all those programs because it's an interinstitutional approach to cyber hygiene.
So is there anything else which individuals can do other than practicing cyber hygiene to safeguard themselves?
Well, believe it or not, cyber hygiene takes care of most of it. The Australian Signals Directorate, which is their version of the National Security Agency, says that proper cyber hygiene takes care of over 80% of your problems. So problems that you and I would have on a daily basis, cyber hygiene would be sufficient. Of course, you want to run a antivirus software at home as well.
When most of these attacks are coming on businesses, so do businesses need to have a sort of a cyber strategy on which all employees are trained, and are people offering these type of things? I mean, one thing is that insurance company and that pipeline which got stuck, big shots, and they're going after them. Are they going after smaller businesses as well?
Yes, they're going for everybody. If you have money or if you have something that is monetizable, they are coming for you. As a matter of fact, they have probably already come for you, and you just aren't aware that they have been there. So companies are doing this, but not every company is. We have a problem in that our senior leaders in the United States are not digital natives yet. It will take until 2050 before all of our leaders are digital natives. And so we have a vulnerability gap here. And so that's one of the things I do is talk to people and make them aware of this. But every company should have a cyber security plan and practice cyber hygiene in their people.
Now, are there some enough cybersecurity experts available in our country to have access and guide and advise and respond when small businesses need guidance for this?
That's a great question. No, we are several 100,000 cyber professionals short. And so universities, public universities, private universities, are all educating cyber people as fast as we can, but the appetite, the need grows faster than we can educate people, because every time you buy something now, it is a smart device. So your refrigerator, your printer, your car are all attack vectors. And so the vulnerability is increasing exponentially, whereas the number of professionals is only progressing geometrically.
Recently, a major insurance company, CNA Insurance, was also under cyber attacks. So, are there some insurances available against the cyber attacks?
Yes, there is cyber insurance that is available, but insurance companies, they're actually discussing it right now after the Capitol pipeline operation and the JDS meat packing operations. The insurance companies are wondering if they can actually make any money off of this, or whether it will actually be a liability for them. Another thing is you must be very careful when you read your contract before you sign your contract for cyber insurance, because it should have very onerous security requirements built into it. And if you don't do those security requirements, they don't have to pay you.
So tell us, if there, news media here and there, and in personal experience, whole lot of these things come from Nigeria. And somewhere recently I read 50% of cyber attacks are originated from Nigeria. But what I was surprised that 25% of those attacks actually originate from the United States itself. So what governments are doing to ensure that the cyber criminality is checked in a better way?
Well, the FBI has the national lead for cybercrime in the United States. Some countries like Russia actually cultivate cyber criminals who will do cybercrime part-time, and then part-time they'll do operations on behalf of the Russian state. Places like Nigeria are pretty much, what you could say is the Wild West, right? It's there isn't sufficient rule of law there to be able to keep cyber criminals under control. In places like the United States, where we have a solid 98% internet penetration rate, 98% of the population has access to a computer of some sort. It's very difficult, especially with our civil liberties, where you can't, like China can observe every Chinese person on the internet. The United States doesn't do that. And so we can't just run around observing everybody. You actually have to have probable cause before you can start to monitor their activities.
I was curious when you mentioned that Russia has people who part-time make money through cyber attacks and part-time they work for the government. Is this a new model of espionage in the world?
Yes. So when the United States wants to expand cyber capability, we put a reserve component recruiting station next to Google or Microsoft. When the Chinese want to expand their capability, they make universities or companies host cyber militias. When the Russians want to expand theirs, when they catch cyber criminals, they say you have two choices: you can go to jail, or you can do cyber operations on behalf of the Russian state. So there's a question, certainly with the Capitol pipeline, the organization that was identified as probably doing that. Were they just a criminal organization looking for money? Were they a criminal organization working with the Russian state, but not under direction of the Russian state? Or were they actually under direction by the Russian government?
Well, thank you so much, Professor Alexander Crowther, for your time.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in to Muslim News. You can find previous episodes and more on YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.